So Kegan, let's talk weather for a minute. Driving in this morning, it was almost like a monsoon, pouring down rain, even though it's winter time. And even some places that I was familiar with, man, my truck just felt like it was wanting to hydroplane, so much rain going on. How does the weather affect welders?
Well, that's a pretty broad term, as in affecting welders specifically, because you got so many things that go into that. So getting to the job, it just depends on where you're at, can be kind of sketchy. So down in Louisiana, it rains nonstop, and they don't cancel any work usually for the rain. Now they do have rainouts where it's extreme weather conditions, but most of the time, if it's just a light drizzle or a light rain, they're not going to call off work. So in that case, you're going to have to be prepared for that. So I always get fireproof rain jackets, and usually the companies supply that. If not, then you're going to have to provide your own rain gear. And so getting to work, driving there, being safe, and then when you're at work, just making sure you have rain gear on that keeps you from getting wet. Now, another big aspect of that is making a weld in the rain. So you're going to have to hooch up, have someone help you hooch up, and a lot of the times, some companies, they won't have you do welds like in the rain, so they won't have you set up in the rain. They'll have some like shop welds and whatnot going on, but sometimes you have to wait for the rain to stop. So, that's another big part of it as well.
There's been times that I've been welding in the past, and all of a sudden it comes a little bit of a sprinkle or a little bit of a rain. You're almost done, and you can finish that weld without really any damage to the product. But one thing that messes me up, when I get a few drops of water on that welding lens, it distorts everything.
Yeah, that's another frustrating thing is whenever it rains, it does get on the lens. Like if you flip your hood up, and obviously your welding hood's going to be upside down, so the rain's going to get inside of the hood, and then it can mess your weld up if you're trying to weld with a wet lens. But I always usually carry like 3 lenses in my bag just so I can do a swap. And sometimes I've got pretty frustrated welding in the rain, and I'll just quit welding altogether because sometimes your gloves will get wet and you go to strike up and you get shocked. And so sometimes I just drop down and tell them, hey, let's just hold off till the rain stops, and then we'll pick back up, because sometimes it can be more of a hazard because you're on wet pipes, you're on wet grating, and so it's just better just to let them know, hey, I don't feel safe doing this, or let's hold off for like another 15 minutes and see if it stops.
Sometimes it's not rain, it's other weather.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. It's the cold, the freezing. I've welded before that so long and standing on ice that I couldn't hardly feel my toes.
Yeah.
So how does the welder cope with the extreme cold weather? Because you still got to use your fingers quite often.
Right. So me personally, I usually get feet warmers when I'm in cold weather. And for your hands, hopefully you're welding chrome, so you stay warm in that aspect. But hands, just wear some insulated welding gloves. That's what I've seen. And also in really cold conditions, sometimes you can only work for a certain amount of time, and then you have to go into a warm area. So I'm pretty sure like in Alaska, some buddies of mine, they've went up there and they could only be outside working for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and then they had to go back in and warm up. So it just depends on where you're at. Now what I do is I don't work where it's cold. So I will travel somewhere else and go work.
I'm with you there.
Yeah, south in the winter, north in the summer. That's what I try to do.
Right. So if you were headed to Alaska, steel toe boots or composite safety toe?
Composite all the way. I don't buy steel toe anymore.
Do you think it makes a huge difference?
I think it does. My feet freeze in steel toe boots. So I always get composite, because you never know if something happens and you have to go work in the winter, or if someone called me to go work in Alaska, I would go work because I've never worked there. So I would have composite toe boots ready to go.
While we're talking on the, environmental issues, something I had a job once, and it was late at night, and I had to make these massive repairs. I was going to be there for, 4, 5, 6 hours, like all night long. Directly behind the job, in between me and the job, was this huge floodlight, a security light of sorts. And this thing was crawling with gazillion bugs. Every time I'd strike an arc, my light was brighter, and guess where they would go?
Back to you?
Right in the back of the welding hood.
Oh my gosh.
I'm telling you, it was just miserable having to fight that. Eventually, I just put on a hoodie in the middle of summer, put the hoodie over the whole hood, and that's how I was able to try to weld and keep going that whole night long. That job was miserable because of bugs, it was an uncontrollable aspect that I had no idea of. What other uncontrollable things have maybe you dealt with?
Wind is a very big factor, especially in certain states. So where I worked this fall and then where I'm going this spring is Wyoming, and Wyoming is the second windiest state. So some days there'll be 30-mile-an-hour winds, and those are the days you hope you aren't in the field welding, because building the hooch is extremely hard, just trying to get it, hold it up and tie it with something. Yeah. So building a hooch can take most of the morning, several hours, just to make one little 2-inch weld, say. So part of the job isn't all welding, it's getting set up to weld. So the wind can be an extremely big factor, you know, stick welding and TIG welding and just all kinds of processes. Most of the time we're in a shop, so we don't have to worry too much, but also there's been a couple times we've been welding in that shop and I thought it was gonna fall over on us because it was just 40-mile-an-hour winds and the whole shop is whipping and everything. And even in a shop sometimes, you will get a cyclone that'll come through a crack and cause a cyclone wind. And if you're in a certain spot in the shop welding some pipe, it'll come underneath there and give you porosity. Like another buddy of mine, I think he busted an x-ray or something because his weld, the bottom of it, because he was stick welding, you know, he would fire up and drag down to the bottom. The wind was going right where his weld was and he caught a little porosity down there at the bottom. And that job we were shooting severe cycles. So me personally, I was being extremely careful of everything, and he just didn't think that the wind would be in there as much as it was, but it was. So the wind is an extremely big factor for your safety and for your weld, because porosity is, you know, oxygen getting in the weld. So that's a really big uncontrollable factor that you have to fight constantly on jobs.
You know, I spent most of my career working for myself, so I would go to different job sites as a sole proprietor or an LLC.
Right.
And I remember several years ago, I was on a particular job site, and the uncontrollable factor was another person. So we were welding 3-inch gas line. It was in a facility that was brand new being built, so everything is about 20, 30 feet up. And to get there, we were in a scissor man lift. Mm-hmm. But because I wasn't with that company, I wasn't authorized to operate the scissor man lift. But the dude operating that, as soon as we get up there, here we go. He's smoking cigarettes and he's drinking coffee and he's talking to his wife and he's texting and all this stuff. Man, it's like welding on a boat. That thing was shaking 30 feet up in the air. Yeah. Finally, I had to tell that man, like, listen, gentlemen, we're trying to make X-ray quality gas line welds here. When you come up, you have got to stand perfectly still.
Right.
Because the little bit of movement is greatly affecting what I'm trying to do up here. Yeah. Have you ever had another person mess with you like that?
Yeah, just depending on what situation you're in. Like if you're in like a man lift, I've done a couple welds at a man lift and the other dude in there is just not moving and you have to kind of straighten them up real quick. Other companies, when you're working around them, they can be pretty,
right.
You know, like your company might have taken their work, so they might be kind of aggravated at that and they might give you a hard time, you know, however that may be. So you just got to kind of watch out for yourself in that aspect and not let other people ruin your weld that you're trying to make and keep your job. And another thing is taking your time. Some people will want to talk to you all day long, right. And it's just like, you know, I've had to buddy weld with some guys and they didn't really want to weld anymore, or they didn't enjoy welding, and so I'm buddy welding with them and they didn't have the same enthusiasm as me to get the weld done. Because personally, I like to make my welds quality and really fast. That's how I stay working all the time. And so I've been buddy welding or brother-in-lawing with people who don't want to, I guess, do that. They just want to take the company's time and just sit there. Like, the thing is, a lot of welders will be like, yeah, let's just milk this weld, you know what I mean, so we don't have to do other welds. And that's just a really poor attitude, I think, because, you know, I just like cranking out welds and you get to stay more busy. And if you do welds fast, the company will want to keep you longer. A lot of people think if you do welds fast, they won't want to keep you. But if you do welds fast and good, they'll keep you. At least in my experience, they've kept me till the end of jobs because they know if they get a weld and they get it done fast, they can count on me. So other welders can be an issue sometimes when you're trying to do quality work or do it fast. So hopefully you guys like this video. We'll be putting out more videos on our YouTube channel, so subscribe to that. And also check out our website. We have links and we also have shop for clothing and a virtual tour. Until next time, see you there.